Article 110 Requirements for Electrical Installations. Part 2b Modifications. When modifications to the electrical installation occur that affect the maximum available fault current of the service, the maximum available fault current shall be verified or recalculated as necessary to ensure the service equipment ratings are sufficient for the maximum available fault current at the line terminals of the equipment. The required field marking S in 11024 shall be adjusted to reflect the new level of maximum available fault current. Exception: the field marking requirements in 11024 and 11024b shall not be required in industrial installations where conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified persons service the equipment. 110.25 Lockable disconnecting means. If a disconnecting means is required to be lockable open elsewhere in this code, it shall be capable of being locked in the open position. The provisions for locking shall remain in place with or without the lock installed. Exception: locking provisions for a cord and plug connection shall not be required to remain in place without the lock installed. Part 2. 1000 volts nominal or less 110.26 spaces about electrical equipment. Access and work ing space shall be provided and maintained about all electrical equipment to permit ready and safe operation and maintenance of such equipment. A working space for equipment operating at 1000 volts nominal or less to ground and likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized shall comply with the dimensions of 110.26.1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 or as required or permitted elsewhere in this code. 1 Depth of working space. The depth of the working space in the direction of live parts shall not be less than that specified in Table 110.26.1, unless the requirements of 110.26.1a, a 1b, or a 1c are met. Distances shall be measured from the exposed live parts or from the enclosure or opening if the live parts are enclosed. A dead front assemblies. Working space shall not be required in the back or sides of assemblies, such as dead front switchboards, switchgear, or motor control centers, where all connections and all renewable or adjustable parts, such as fuses or switches, are accessible from locations other than the back or sides. Where rear access is required to work on non-electrical parts on the back of enclosed equipment, a minimum horizontal working space of 760 mm 30 in shall be provided. B. Low voltage. By special permission, smaller working spaces shall be permitted where all exposed live parts operate at not greater than 30 volts IMS, 42 volts peak, or 60 volts DC. See existing buildings. In existing buildings where electrical equipment is being replaced, Condition 2 working clearance shall be permitted between dead front switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, or motor control centers located across the aisle from each other where conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that written procedures have been adopted to prohibit equipment on both sides of the aisle from being open at the same time and qualified persons who are authorized will service the installation. 2 Width of working space. The width of the working space in front of the electrical equipment shall be the width of the equipment or 760 mm 30 in, whichever is greater. In all cases, the workspace shall permit at least a 90-degree opening of equipment doors or hinged panels. 3 Height of working space. The workspace shall be clear and extend from the grade, floor, or platform to a height of 2.0 meters 61 feet or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. Within the height requirements of this section, other equipment that is associated with the electrical installation and is located above or below the electrical equipment shall be permitted to extend not more than 150 mm 6 in beyond the front of the electrical equipment. Exception number 1. In existing dwelling units, service equipment or panel boards that do not exceed 200 amperes shall be permitted in spaces where the height of the working space is less than 2.0 meters 61 feet. Exception number 2. Meters that are installed in meter sockets shall be permitted to extend beyond the other equipment. The meter socket shall be required to follow the rules of this section. N4 Limited access, where equipment operating at 1000 volts, nominal, or less to ground and likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized is required by installation instructions of function to be located in a space with limited access. All of the following shall apply. Table 110.26.1. Working spaces nominal minimum clear distance voltage to ground condition 1 condition 2 condition 3 0 minus 150 900 millimeters 3 feet 151600 900 millimeters 3 feet 900 millimeters 3 feet 1.0 meter 3 feet 6 in 1.2 meter 4 feet 900 millimeters 3 feet 1.2 meter 4 feet 1.5 meter 5 feet 6011090 millimeters 3 feet condition 1 exposed live parts on one side of the working space and no live or grounded parts on the other side of the working space, or exposed live parts on both sides of the working space that are effectively guarded by insulating materials. Condition 2 exposed live parts on one side of the working space and grounded parts on the other side of the working space. Concrete, brick, or tile walls shall be considered as grounded. Condition 3 exposed live parts on both sides of the working space. But where equipment is installed above a lay-in ceiling, there shall be an opening not smaller than 559 mm 559 22 in, or in a crawl space. There shall be an accessible opening not smaller than 559 mm 760 mm 22 in, 30 in. B. The width of the working space shall be the width of the equipment enclosure or a minimum of 762 mm 30 in, whichever is greater. C. All enclosure doors or hinge panels shall be capable of opening a minimum of 90 degrees. D. The space in front of the enclosure shall comply with the depth requirements of Table 110-26-1. The maximum height of the working space shall be the height necessary to install the equipment in the limited space. A horizontal ceiling structural member or access panel shall be permitted in this space. In 5. Separation from high voltage equipment, where switches, cutouts, or other equipment operating at 1000 volts, nominal, or less are installed in a vault, room, or enclosure where there are exposed live parts or exposed wiring operating over 1000 volts, nominal. The high voltage equipment shall be effectively separated from the space occupied by the low voltage equipment by a suitable partition, fence, or screen. B. Clear spaces. Working space required by this section shall not be used for storage. When normally enclosed live parts are exposed for inspection or servicing, the working space, if in a passageway or general open space, shall be suitably guarded. See entrance to and egress from working space. 1 minimum required. At least one entrance of sufficient area shall be provided to give access to and egress from working space about electrical equipment. 2. Large equipment. For equipment rated 1200 amperes or more and over 1.8 meters 6 feet wide that contains overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices, there shall be one entrance to and egress from the required working space not less than 610 mm 24 in wide and 2.0 meters 61 feet high at each end of the working space. A single entrance to and egress from the required working space shall be permitted where either of the conditions in 11026C2A or C2B is met. An unobstructed egress. Where the location permits a continuous and unobstructed way of egress travel, a single entrance to the working space shall be permitted. B. Extra working space. Where the depth of the working space is twice that required by 11026-1, a single entrance shall be permitted. It shall be located such that the distance from the equipment to the nearest edge of the entrance is not less than the minimum clear distance specified in Table 11026-1 for equipment operating at that voltage and in that condition. 3. Personnel doors. Where equipment rated 800A or more that contains overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices is installed, and there is a personnel door S intended for entrance to and egress from the working space less than 7.6 meters 25 feet from the nearest edge of the working space, the door S shall open in the direction of egress and be equipped with listed panic hardware. D. Illumination. Illumination shall be provided for all working spaces about service equipment, switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, or motor control centers installed indoors. Control by automatic means only shall not be permitted. Additional lighting outlets shall not be required where the workspace is illuminated by an adjacent light source or is permitted by 21070-1. Exception number 1. For switched receptacles. A dedicated equipment space. All switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, and motor control centers shall be located in dedicated spaces and protected from damage. Exception. Control equipment by its very nature or because of other rules of the code must be adjacent to or within sight of its operating machinery shall be permitted in those locations. 1. Indoor. Indoor installations shall comply with 110.26E1A through E1D. A dedicated electrical space, the space equal to the width and depth of the equipment, and extending from the floor to a height of 1.8 meters 6 feet above the equipment or to the structural ceiling, whichever is lower, shall be dedicated to the electrical installation. No piping, ducts, leak protection apparatus, or other equipment foreign to the electrical installation shall be located in this zone. Exception: suspended ceilings with removable panels shall be permitted within the 1.8 m 6 feet zone. D. Foreign systems. The area above the dedicated space required by 110.26E1A shall be permitted to contain foreign systems, provided protection is installed to avoid damage to the electrical equipment from condensation, leaks, or breaks in such foreign systems. C. Sprinkler protection. Sprinkler protection shall be permitted for the dedicated space, where the piping complies with this section. D. Suspended ceilings. A dropped, suspended, or similar ceiling that does not add strength to the building structure shall not be considered a structural ceiling. 2. Outdoor. Outdoor installations shall comply with 110.26E2A through C. Installation requirements. Outdoor electrical equipment shall be BC dedicated equipment space, the space equal to the width and depth of the equipment, and extending from grade to a height of 1.8 meters 6 feet above the equipment, shall be dedicated to the electrical installation. No piping or other equipment foreign to the electrical installation shall be located in this zone. F. Locked electrical equipment rooms or enclosures. Electrical equipment rooms or enclosures housing electrical apparatus that are controlled by a lock-S shall be considered accessible to qualified persons. 110.27 Guarding of live parts. By any of the following means. 1. 2. By location in a room, fort, or similar enclosure that is accessible only to qualified persons. By permanent, substantial partitions or screens arranged so that only qualified persons have access to the space within reach of the live parts. Any openings in such partitions or screens shall be sized and located so that persons are not likely to come into accidental contact with the live parts or to bring conducting objects into contact with them. By location on a balcony, gallery, or platform elevated and arranged so as to exclude unqualified persons. By elevation above the floor or other working surface as follows. A minimum of 2.5 meters 8 feet for 50 volts to 300 volts. A minimum of 2.6 meters for 301 volts to 600 volts. F. Locked electrical equipment rooms or enclosures. Electrical equipment rooms or enclosures housing electrical apparatus that are controlled by a lock-S shall be considered accessible to qualified persons. Part 3. Over 1000 volts. Nominal 110.30 General. Conductors and equipment used on circuits over 1000 volts. Nominal shall comply with Part I of this article and with 110.3 through 110.41, which supplement or modify Part I. In no case shall the provisions of this part apply to equipment on the supply side of the service point. 110.31 Enclosure for electrical installations. Electrical installations in a vault, room, or closet, or in an area surrounded by a wall, screen, or fence, access to which is controlled by a lock-S or other approved means, shall be considered to be accessible to qualified persons only. The type of enclosure used in a given case shall be designed and constructed according to the nature and degree of the hazard associated with the installation. For installations other than equipment as described in 11031D, a wall, screen, or fence shall be used to enclose an outdoor electrical installation to deter access by persons who are not qualified. A fence shall not be less than 2.1 meters 7 feet in height or a combination of 1.8 meters 6 feet or more of fence fabric and a 300 millimeters 1 feet or more extension, utilizing 3 or more strands of barbed wire or equivalent. The distance from the fence to live parts shall be not less than given in Table 110.31. Informational note. See Article 450 for construction requirements for transformer vaults. Electrical vaults. Where an electrical vault is required or specified for conductors and equipment, 1103101-5 shall apply. 1. Walls and roof. The walls and roof shall be constructed of materials that have adequate structural strength for the conditions, with a minimum fire rating of 3 hours. For the purpose of this section, Studs and wallboard construction shall not be permitted. 2 floors. The floors of vaults in contact with the earth shall be of concrete that is not less than 100 mm 4 in thick, but where the vault is constructed with a vacant space or has stories below it, the floor shall have adequate structural strength for the load imposed on it and a minimum fire resist ANC of 3 hours. 3 doors. Each doorway leading into a vault from the build-ing interior shall be provided with a tight-fitting door that has a minimum fire rating of 3 hours. The authority having jurisdiction shall be permitted to require such a door for an exterior wall opening where conditions warrant. Exception to 1, 2, and 3, where the vault is protected with automatic sprinkler, water spray, carbon dioxide, or halon. Construction with a 1-hour rating shall be permitted. 4 locks. Doors shall be equipped with locks, and doors shall be kept locked, with access allowed only to qualified persons. Personnel doors shall swing out and be equipped with panic bars, pressure plates, or other devices that are normally latched, but that open under simple pressure. 5 transformers. Where a transformer is installed in a vault as required by Article 450, the vault shall be constructed in accordance with the requirements of Part 3 of Article 450. Informational Note Number 1. For additional information, see ANSR or ASTM 119215 Method for Fire Tests of Building Construction and Materials, and NFPA 802016 Standard for Fire Doors and Other Opening Protectives, except as elsewhere required or permitted by this code. Live parts of electrical equipment operating at 50 to 1000 volts nominal shall be guarded against accidental contact by approved enclosures, or 3B, prevent physical damage. In locations where electrical equipment is likely to be exposed to physical damage, enclosures or guards shall be so arranged and of such strength as to prevent such damage. See warning signs. Entrances to rooms and other guarded locations that contain exposed live parts shall be marked with conspicuous warning signs forbidding unqualified persons to enter. The marking shall meet the requirements in 11021B. Informational note. For motors, see 430.232 and 430.233. For over 1000 volts, see 110.34.110.28 enclosure types. Enclosures other than surrounding fences or walls covered in 110.31 of switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, industrial control panels, motor control centers, meter sockets, enclosed switches, transfer switches, power outlets, circuit breakers, adjustable speed drive systems, pull-out switches, portable power distribution equipment, termination boxes, general-purpose transformers, fire pump controllers, fire pump motors, and motor controllers, rated not over 1000 volts nominal and intended for such locations, shall be marked with an enclosure type number as shown in Table 110.28. Table 110.28 shall be used for selecting these enclosures for use in specific locations other than hazardous classified locations. The enclosures are not intended to protect against conditions such as condensation, icing, corrosion, or contamination that may occur within the enclosure or enter via the conduit or unsealed openings. This is the end of Article 110 General Electrical Requirements, Part 2.